So, like, why don't you give people a little bit about your brief history, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about, range master, and then we'll go into it from there.
Sure. So obviously my name's Tim Herron. I own a company called Tim Herron Shooting LLC. I'm a kind of a national traveling firearms trainer. So primarily with pistols. I don't do much of anything with like carbines or shotguns or combatives or defensive kind of things. I'm more of what we would call like a performance-based shooting instructor. But I do personal coaching, small class coaching, as well as like larger classes too. My largest classes get about somewhere between the neighborhood of like 12 to 13 students. I like kind of smaller, intimate groups, of classes because I love and really thrive on like one-on-one interaction with students. But yeah, I've been teaching since, 2015 or 2016. Like I said, I started shooting in 2010. I picked up competitive shooting like really, really early, about 6 months into shooting period in like July of 2010. And I started out as like a C class shooter and kind of moved upon the ranks, and love training, love learning. It was really cool to be a student, and I'm still consider myself a vast student of the martial art of shooting. So I try to go to at least 1 to 2 classes a year when I can, and try to fit those into my schedule. And then I teach probably somewhere between 35 to 45 classes a year as well, all over the country. So I became a USPSA Grandmaster, which is kind of the highest rank. It's like, I guess it'd be kind of considered like being a black belt in a martial art. But the USPSA Grandmaster, I'm now a 4-division Grandmaster in 4 different pistol divisions within USPSA. I'm also an IDPA Master. And I love to compete as much as I love to teach and learn. So I'm always trying to grow my skill set as well. So I moved here in 2018 and went about the same time that I went full time as a professional trainer. Quit my full time job. I had 25, 26 years as an automotive mechanic. So shooting was kind of started out as a hobby, and then became kind of a passion, and then of course now became like my way of life, my career. So started teaching full-time in 2018. So this would be my 6th year, 2024 would be my 6th year of a continuous career in the shooting sports as a coach, a trainer, and a competitor.
Wow. That's interesting. Cause, like not a lot of people, they'll think that because you're shooting that you have to have that kind of a military or law enforcement background.
Oh yeah, no military, no law enforcement. Like I said, I was a hobbyist, just a guy that, initially I picked up a pistol because I saw, like I had eventually throughout my life, it kind of saw a need for like, man, the world can be a dangerous place. And I've been a single dad for a number of years, and throughout some kind of serious life changes between some financial and marital changes and things like that. I found myself as a single dad of 2 little ones. At the time, my son was like 10 and my daughter was 3, and raising 2 kids in kind of a newer part of area, of Kansas City was a little shady. It was what it was, is kind of just, living the life, with the handed cards that I was dealt, and I'd never really considered firearms ownership before, but I was also the guy that like, I never wanted to just like, I don't know, pick something up and just, immediately be that guy like, oh, I know all about that. I'm a guy, right? Of course we know how to shoot, we know how to drive, all of those kind of things. So right. Seeing the need to pick up a firearm or to possibly be a firearms owner, I took that very seriously. So, for me, it was like, I want to get trained on this. I want to understand, all of the nuances. I know it's a very dangerous thing. And I wanted to ensure that, not only for my safety, but the safety of my kids and safety of, those around me, that I was well-versed enough, like at first you kind of get that, like, I'm well-versed enough to not be a detriment to people in society around me. That just kind of turned into like, well, this is very interesting. And it's at the same time, like going to the range and learning how to utilize it and learning how to become more accurate kind of became like almost a Zen type of thing as well. It was neat to kind of disassociate from the rest of the world for just a couple of hours on a Saturday morning and go to the range and just and learn that, it's me and the sights and the gun and the target and how to do things better. Became very, very interesting to me, and that's kind of what really kicked off the like becoming a passion, and something I really wanted to master and become better at. And so that kind of kicked me off down that journey. So
what was it like for you to first get into it and start competing? What was your first competition like?
So my very first competition, I was very fortunate enough to always kind of like to be lucky, I guess, to fall into good folks that were like fantastic mentors along the way. And I think a lot of people kind of share the same thing. They're like, oh, I picked up a gun and I met a great guy or a great gal at the range, and they kind of helped me along the way. And dude, I was super blessed to have kind of the right influences at the right time to kind of lead me into things. So one of the guys that I'd met at the range became a very good friend and early mentor, that took me to my first outdoor range, outing, and kind of taught me the rule set of like USPSA and the shooting sports, and then took me to my first match. And my very first match was a USPSA all classifier match. I had no idea what classifiers were or any of that stuff. I was just like, oh man, this is a lot of fun. And people kept talking about, oh, I think I made B class on that, or I think I made A class. And, I'm just like scratching my head, like, what are these people talking about? I don't understand what this means, but I'm having fun and this is a ball anyway. And right after that match, I knew a little bit about USPSA, but I hadn't purchased a membership. I hadn't really thought about like, how serious do I want to take this? And until I shot my first match, and just getting a really good, like having a really good experience and meeting other like-minded people, man, that kicked it off. I was like, man, I want to buy a membership. I want to become more of this. I want to do this more and hang out with these guys more often on weekends. And so that's kind of what started all this thing. So
yeah. So you want to hear something funny?
yes.
So when I would been a member for USPSA for, I don't know, about a year or two before I actually started to shoot matches or regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, my schedule was ass. I got 4 kids, guys. It's a commitment, right? And I always felt like USPSA is a sport you can't dabble in. Like you cannot fuck around and then expect a good performance. Like you have to be dedicated to the dry fire. And
right.
It, like you said, it's a martial art. And it's like going to a match it was like, the way I compared it to was just like going to any other jiu-jitsu tournament. Like once you're out there, the data is going to show whether or not you're actually doing the dry fire. Like usually, like most of the struggles you hear people saying, oh, well, I'm having trouble doing this or finding the dot. A lot of that is like translates to, well, I don't dry fire.
Right.
And so I didn't, so it was like a thing where I was like, okay, well, I need to go do USPSA because it's like Boy Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
It's really dorky, but it's also really good for you. So I was like, all right, let me go do this thing. And I realized like, wow, my whole perceptions, everything I thought about shooting competition was changed. And so I was like, all right, let me get serious about this. I go sign up for a match, and it was an all classifier match. I'm like, shit. I have not been dry fire like I should. I was like, all right, well, the results were what they were.
Sure.
But yeah, but it just when my schedule finally freed up where I'm able to go and shoot on the weekends, what I realized about it was like everybody just like, most people just don't take themselves very seriously like you do see people do like in the tactical world. Like in the tactical world, people just take themselves way too serious. A lot of
almost too like they go overboard with it. Yep.
Yeah, like you want to go and make sure you stop. It's just like, chill out, dude. Can you just show me how to hold this thing, right? And like a lot of so a lot of things kind of get lost in translation because like we're kind of looking for solutions to specific problems in the tactical realm, whereas in the shooting world and the competition, at least for matches, all of it is just a test of what your current shooting ability is.
That's exactly what I tell people all the time. Like USPSA is the test. and it's just to kind of to get you to understand like where you are as a shooter, so you can see your strengths, but you can also see where kind of like where your shortcomings are, to then be able to take those things and take it back to your own practice and training to hopefully want to improve those things. And I get like everybody's got a different interest, like kind of interest rate, so to speak, in USPSA. Like some people are only interested in like, man, I like going out and shooting 150 to 200 rounds with my buddies. And, and afterwards going out for like, I don't know, beer and tacos or something, and just hanging out for the social aspect of it. And you know what? That is awesome. Like some of the best friends I've made in the sport, even as I've progressed, to a full-time trainer and things like that, some of my absolute closest friends that I shoot with on the weekends are just the hobbyists. They're just the guys that are like, man, I want a 5-hour break away from, family and work and everything else to just go out and shoot some guns with my buddies and go out for beers afterwards. Awesome. And as long as you kind of just know what your interest level is on it, and you're serious, you're serious about that with yourself, that's totally cool. There are other guys that they use that, I think, as an excuse to not want to get better because they know their interest level in working towards a betterment or working towards an improvement or progression is beyond their realm of, like, I don't know, like taking those opportunities seriously, like that, like, man, I don't want to dry fire 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week. And I don't want to go to the range, outside of just going to the match, on a Saturday. I don't want to have to put in all that other work. So they, like I said, they want to get better and they want to do better and they want to win when they go to matches or do well at matches, but they don't want to put in the work. So then they lie to themselves and say, wow, I don't want to take this too seriously. I don't want to do these things like they want to, but they know it's going to be more effort than they want to put into things. So as long as you're honest with yourself about those things, great. But if you're going to lie to yourself and then lie to me or other people about like what your true level of involvement is, and like, I mean, we could pick it out. When you get super frustrated when you do something wrong in a match and you're like, oh, I keep making the same mistake, and I'm getting in the background and 3 or 4 other guys in the background are like, hey, we could help you out with that. And they're like, meh, what do you guys know? And we see that too, not even just at matches. We see that online too, social media guys, they talk about how good they want to be or how good they think they are until they've talked themselves like completely out of actually putting in the work to get good at things. It just, like, sometimes I've just got to be like, well, then you're really not being honest with yourself to begin with. A good friend and a mentor of mine, obviously, one of the winningest shooters in the world, is a guy named Rob Latham. And Rob's from out in Scottsdale, Mesa, Arizona area forever. And Rob put it the best. I took a class with Rob and Mike Seeklander a couple years ago, and I was like, people think shooting is fun and blah 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 blah. And shooting is fun. And Rob's like, hey, right? You're right. Shooting is fun. He goes, what's even more fun? When you win. And I was like, oh man, like that's true. Like everybody likes to lie to themselves and be like, oh, the shooting is just, I'm just out for fun, but then they get up frustrated and they'll leave a match so mad that they did bad. And it's like, yeah, it is fun to go out and shoot with your buddies, but it's also fun to do well, and like maybe winning doesn't necessarily mean I want to win at the highest level, but maybe winning means like not making the same mistakes over and over and over again. Like that's winning. And that makes it more fun. So, it's like use the term winning kind of relatively to what you like your interest level, and like it is fun to do well, better than it is fun to just go out and participate too. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with those things.
Tim, like the main reason I wanted to talk to you today too is to kind of talk about this, like, what I was trying to brainstorm what's a way to describe it. And the only thing I landed on was kind of this paradox of mastery, where it's like people think that you are born with this innate talent and ability and skill that it just kind of just like, what, I'm going to put on my G card today. I'm going to just show out and just get this hit factor. I'm going to throw on my black belt today, and I'm just going to
Right.
perform at the same level as everybody else, that there really is no a process to that development of the skill. And I think as someone who has been DQ'd in his first USPSA match, as someone who's been DQ'd in their first jiu-jitsu competition and lost in innumerable situation, I would say that is room temperature dumb. So, let's talk a little bit about that. What has been your experience with that? Like, where do you stand on this idea that because of your degree of skill, you're disconnected from the struggles of the novice?
Oh my gosh, I see it all the time. Not necessarily, not really from the realm of like in classes. I think students have already kind of, I don't want to say humbled themselves, but like when a student pays to come to a class, I think, I think it's important for me as a trainer, as a coach, to be able to relate to the student, in a way that, the way that they can understand. So like being able to, come back, like to get on their level and be like, hey man, I understand these struggles because I have had to overcome these struggles. I think it's much easier for a student to digest that in a class setting. It's almost impossible much of the time, especially with how popular social media is, for people, let's say, that are kind of early into their journey in shooting. They almost become dismissive when and maybe it's my approach, maybe it's other people's approach, or maybe it's just their lack of reception to input when they reach out for help. And we see this in like Facebook groups or Instagram, pages and things like that, where somebody will kind of put themselves out there like, hey man, I'm working on this. And what do you see I'm doing right? Or what do you see I'm doing wrong? And I think even when people are like, what do you see I'm doing wrong? They're actually not looking for input. What they're actually looking for is validation, and I think too many people seek validation and not enough people are actually seeking improvement. Or seeking the actual advice that they want, because they don't want to hear, hey, what can I improve on? They just want to hear like, oh, get the little pat on the back. You're doing so good, buddy. Keep it up, and that's a hard pill, I think, for many people to swallow. Like I said, they want the validation, but they word it in a way where they're like, man, I'm seeking improvement, but they don't want to hear it. And so no matter how you approach it, like in a kind of like where I'm at, as a shooter, it becomes so very easy to dismiss. Like, well, Tim, you don't understand the struggles that I have. And I'm sometimes I'll just drop my phone in hysteria, laughing so much. And I'm like, what do you mean I don't understand? Like, are you kidding me? You think I just, like I was birthed out of the womb with, a pistol in my hand. It was like, I'm ready to go. I was born a GM. Like, dude, this has been an absolute freaking work. This had been lifestyle changes in order to become the person, or the shooter or the practitioner I wanted to become. I didn't just, there was no innate ability to like, I was just born with this. Like I've had to bust my ass to do this. And I think sometimes that's lost in translation, no matter where you're trying to meet that person on the other end of like the social media spectrum. It just becomes like, well, you wouldn't know, or, well, you're too serious for me and you don't understand just what my level of involvement is. Like, no, I do, because I was also that person that lied to myself for a number of years too. Like, oh, I only care to be this good, or, oh, I'm only doing this because it gives me something to do and I'm just a hobbyist. And until you, like I said, it, like in the words again of my friend Rob Latham, like what's fun is participating, but what's more fun is doing well, is winning, and like the way we are wired as human beings. I don't care if you're a competitive person or you're you can lie to yourself and tell yourself you are non-competitive. We are built by God to be somewhat competitive, right? Everything in just humankind is survival of the fittest. And by God, we all want to be the fittest. We all want to survive. We all compete on some realm, some level, and I've never met anybody, as much as I've tried, meet anybody that's just like, I'm perfectly happy and content with where I'm at, that didn't have some sort of thought process in the back of their mind. They're like, I'd actually like to get better at this. Everybody likes to seek improvement and betterment and not just be stagnant wherever they are. It's human nature, right? So we're only doing ourselves a disservice to be like, I'm good enough. I don't need to be any better. But then you seek the improvement. I want to get better, but then immediately dismiss somebody who is better that can help you along the way. And then just lie to yourself again or lie to them and be like, nope, I don't need to be as good as you. So anything you tell me doesn't matter to me. And I know as well as I do, many of those people. We have interactions with them every day. And sometimes it can be frustrating. There have been other times I've just been like, I can be the most passive person, be like, whatever, dude. And it's certain people, you just want to grab them by the shoulders and shake the shit out of them, because you're like, I know you're only lying to yourself. And I just wish you wouldn't. Just be more honest and open.
Yeah. And when it comes to that, I don't know, that disillusionment, I suppose you want to call it, is just that, or really just making the excuses for yourself as far as like, I can perform at this level and that's all I need. For a practitioner, someone who is like, they just want to be able to protect their family or whatever. They don't have the time or the resources to invest in this. And that's cool. I'm okay with that. But for an instructor, man, I just can't accept that. I just
not even thinking about it as an instructor. Think about it as like people that want to be self-proclaimed subject matter experts on things that they're actually not willing to put in the work required to truly be an expert in the subject that they want to consider themselves an expert in. Like if you're a subject matter expert, you're never done. You're never done. You're never done learning. You're never done progressing. You're constantly seeking improvement and betterment and a higher degree of knowledge. So I hate the term SME, or subject matter expert, especially by these guys that are self-proclaimed subject matter experts that are nothing more than parrots of people that actually have put in the work and continue to put in the work to become an actual expert in whatever their field of study is.
Yeah, and that's a particularly frustrating, going through the process of learning martial art, of jiu-jitsu, of shooting, of combatives, and then seeing people who have really done nothing, for lack of a better word, and they're seen as experts simply just because they say so. And it's like the equivalent of someone, well, I'm a PhD just because I say so. And it's like, if you're a PhD, doesn't matter if your parents own the school, they're their main beneficiary or something to that degree. You still have to provide a dissertation with your body of work that says you know how to do something. And then also on top of that, coaching itself, that's its own skill. And it's like, you want to be a coach, you want to be an instructor. I don't know. I don't really see that point of like, I'm just getting into this just to be an instructor. I really think that's usually a huge, a massive red flag, because it's usually guys who haven't done anything or really moved outside of the institutional bubble for the most part, or guys who are just really, they just want the status symbol.
Sure.
They don't really, it's like, but there's so much that's attached to this. Like in your world, like guys don't make the podium. That's a big deal. That really affects your job. Like, and it's, people know what they need to do, but they really want to hear it from your face for some reason. So like, or it's like, or if you tell them the truth about what it is that they should be doing and they've been avoiding it, they don't like it.
Right. Right. So, well, and we see it too with, just like I said, the level of involvement or the level the level of work that they're willing to put in, right? Then it becomes like you said, we hear these excuses. Well, I've got 3 kids, or well, I've got a job that I work, 50 plus hours a week, or well, my life's too demanding. So this is just something I just want to do. I'd like to be good at it, but I refuse to put in the work because I just don't have the time. And we see it in everything. I'll tell you what, like I've had to make sacrifices along the way to become the shooter and the practitioner that I am. And I still continue to make those sacrifices too. It's prioritizing things in your life. What's important, like if you're like, oh, I just don't have the time yet. The next post I see from you is like, well, I spent all day yesterday on my day off binge watching 2 seasons of blah, 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 blah on Netflix. And I'm like, bro, you had plenty of time. It's just, you didn't want to prioritize your use of that time appropriately. Like I said, in 2008 is when I kind of underwent some pretty significant life changes. I had a pretty crappy divorce. Some big financial changes. And like I said, I found myself as a full-time parent of 2 little kids. It's not like I had an 18-year-old, son at home that helped me raise, I could spend some time away to go to the range and go do other things because I had kids at home that could take care of each other. I mean, my son was 10 and my daughter was 3, and, or he was 9 and she was 3. But I mean, I raised 2 kids while also working 50 plus hours a week. But I had an interest in wanting to better myself, as a shooting practitioner, and did that while being a full-time dad of 2. While at the same time, not disassociating myself from like my duties as a father and as a provider, but making time. So like, put the kids to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And okay, cool. I've got 45 minutes before I want to go to bed. I could sit here on the couch and just veg out, or I could put on my belt and, drop a gun in the holster and dry fire for 25, 30 minutes, hey, the kids are, at a sleepover at their friend's house. So I've got an extra, I've got a free 35 minutes or an hour or whatever that I can go to the range and go put in a couple 100 rounds, like I made those things, like a priority to me because I wanted to improve. And it's like, so anybody that says they don't have the time or, they don't have the time or the resources, bro, I'm walking proof, every day walking effing proof that you can make the time, you can prioritize the things you want to, if you truly want to get better at it. And now for me, like I wanted to become a grandmaster. I wanted to become a top level competitor, and those things don't come easy. I was dry firing an hour a night, or sometimes, 30 minutes in the morning before work, and getting the kids up to, to take them to daycare, to take them to school. Sometimes it was taking my gear with me to work. And then, like on my lunch break, there was a range that was 45 minutes down the road, or not 45 minutes, it was, 10 minutes down the road. And I'd spend 45 minutes at the range and get in a quick practice session, live fire practice session at an indoor range, which isn't always the most conducive to, the work that I wanted to do, but it's what I had.
Yeah.
So, but it's like guys that say like, I don't, like I want to lose weight. But then their idea of losing weight is like, okay, when I order McDonald's 3 times a week, I'm going to order a Diet Coke to go along with that Big Mac and that large fries, right? It's like, I'm doing the work. Like, no, you're not, or I go to the gym once a week, and my idea of going to the gym is I'm just going to jump on the treadmill for 30 minutes, barely break a little sweat ring around the top part of the collar of my t-shirt. And then I'm immediately going to chase it with Burger King on the way back to home or whatever. It's like, you're telling yourself you're walking the walk, but you're really not. Right. And it's like I said, everybody can carve out the time if they really want it. And that's the biggest thing to overcome first. Like, you want to be a subject matter expert, put in the effing work to become an expert then. If not, shut the hell up.
Yeah. The funny thing about this industry that it's incredibly difficult to be a discerning consumer, because a lot of times what has to happen is that you have to be informed on what these things mean before before you can actually choose what's the right path for you. What do you want your skills to express? What are you looking to do? There's so many different ways, right? So like
Right.
I don't knock what anybody's doing. If their idea of movement is to get out and go to their lightsaber fighting class, cool. Just don't act like the the Revenge of the Sith is real. Like I'm okay with that.
Right.
If that's your movement, I'm okay with that.
Sure.
But the idea, like, I think it's a good rule of thumb for people when they're just kind of coming in and they're like trying to figure out where to spend their time, where to spend their money. I think it's a good idea to look at who has respect amongst like really high level instructors, and not just the guys who are in the bubble, right? Not like the bro vet lifestyle brand bubbles, like
Mhm.
guys that are outside of there, guys that are within the performance circle, the defensive circles. Like, it's kind of hard to find. And then once you look at that, and if you look for that, there are very, very few people that are actually kind of crossing those, tiptoeing in all those areas.
Sure.
Um,
Well, I
but
think a big part of it too is some people like to consider themselves like again, an expert, but the really only thing that they're truly an expert in, and it's not a diss against anybody, is like they're an expert marketer, right? They've
Yeah,
got the flashy Instagram pages, they've got the 100,000 followers they're not real followers, right? They've invested a couple $1,000s to buy these followers so that their Instagram page looks great. They might, they've got good camera skills and good editing skills and good publishing skills, and that looks attractive to many people, and I'll be honest. I mean, sometimes it looks super attractive to me. I'm like, well, shit, if they've got the skill set to be able to market themselves at a high level, on social media, perhaps they also have the skills to kind of follow that, like in their field of expertise, to teach
yeah,
me something, and it's unfortunate that everything basically looks good through rose-colored glasses. It like,
right.
oh man, that looks great. Oh man, that guy, he's got to know what he's doing. And a lot of that social media fame is kind of short-lived too. I mean, there's a lot of guys that, kind of travel in the circles that we do, that they don't even have a social media presence, but man, they can fill classes, and and it's based on their merit as a
Yeah,
true expert, or as a true coach or a true instructor or a knowledgeable, a very knowledgeable person that's worthy of your time as a student to partake in what they're sharing.
mhm,
So it's
yeah,
it's a it's a hard it's a hard balance now as a
yeah.
professional coach, to kind of like, man, do I just put all my marbles in the marketing gig, or do I really just need to focus, on like exploring further in depth my expertise, and always improving that too. So, you know, I don't always have the flashiest Instagram pages, and you know what? I'm totally cool with it. So, I would rather be able
Yeah.
to offer a deeper level of understanding and a deeper level of education to the folks that want to actually, like, that are truly seeking out that stuff, and not just the whiz bang flash, social media stuff.
Well, I think that the truly for people that you're trying to serve, I think as a coach, there is that all have that type of person that makes us wake up early, work a little bit harder. The person that's like, man, I'm going to be super excited to spend the day with this person. I'm going to prep you know what I mean? I'm just going to, there is nothing more exciting to me than like this type of person that I get to train. And
100%.
I think that a lot of what happens is like when things are very superficial, the superficial people, like if that's what they're looking for, a lot of times those are not the kind of people I'm trying to serve. A lot
Right.
of times it's like the people who are really looking for real value, real skill, real knowledge. Uh, for them, what's inside the wrapper matters more than the wrapper itself.
Yeah. Improvement seekers versus entertainment seekers.
Right. Right. And then we kind of get there's a lot of, I don't know. I guess like in the circles we run into, we can see a lot of other instructors. They get frustrated with the game of social media, and like, oh my God, this
Sure.
guy, he's putting out some entertainment and stuff like that. But like, so social media is by design an entertainment platform. It's not a
100%.
library for educational resource or anything like that. We just happen to be contributing to that space. And it's just, but again, right, it's the realm of ideas, and we get to put out our ideas as instructors. And really, a lot of what I see also in the people who are serious trainers is like using social media as a realm of ideas to collaborate and really explore and really push each other in different ways. Kind of like your head box drill, which is like, Jesus Christ, Tim, like save some for the rest of us. Jesus. Where did that come from?
That was that. So believe it or not, that actually came from a student that the kind of, I don't want to say he challenged me. It wasn't like I'll bet you can't do this kind of thing, but like I was in Buckeye, Arizona back in January last year, and, taught a fantastic 2-day class there. John Correa, came out from Active Self-Protection and videoed the entire 2-day class and kind of broke it down. So, it's on his website and things too, which is really cool. But we got to talking, I think, over lunch on day 2 and one of the students was like, he said, Tim, what's the hardest thing, like hardest task or skill or drill or anything that you've ever done or ever accomplished? And I had to think about it. I was like, well, I had to really work hard for this, or I had to do this. And man, I remember spending a lot of time really working on focusing on this. And he was like, man, so like, what's your fastest bill drill? And I was like, oh God, my fastest bill drill. I was like, yeah, it's like a 161 or something like that. And he was like, oh my God, that's incredible. And then I can't remember who it was, but another student jumped in and he was like, have you ever thought about doing like a bill drill to the head box? And I'm like, well, I wouldn't imagine that being like super hard. And, it's like the head box is just half the size of the actual like lower A zone, because it's 6 inches by 6 inches. And he was like, oh yeah. It's like, man, so many people struggle with like a 2-second bill drill to just the torso, the A zone of the torso. Is like, man, do you think you'd be able to rail off a 2-second bill drill to the head? And I was like, yeah. I said, I mean, you got to hold yourself a little higher, standard of accuracy to the head box. And then somebody else chimed in. They were like, no. What about the actual upper A zone head box? And I was like, oh God. I'm like, dude, I don't even know if anybody has ever even chased or pursued that. And that's what kind of like those three, one of the two of those students were like, dude, you should try that. I was like, I may have to give that a go when I get home. Yeah. So, on the way home from Buckeye, I'm driving home and I'm like, man, that was an interesting conversation. I've never even tried that before. I think I'm going to try that. And so got home that Sunday night. Monday, kind of took the day off, followed through some things. And then Tuesday I was like, I'm going to go out to the range and I'm going to give that a try. And then like 1,500 rounds later and 4 days of frustration and pushing, and I'm going to nail this kind of, I finally able to do it. Now I've been able to do it multiple times. I'm getting a little bit more consistent at it, but yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about it was like the hunger in being driven to want to achieve something. It's like, here's an outcome that's just far enough away from me that it doesn't necessarily seem impossible, but it seems really, really difficult. And the challenge associated with that, and then the physical push of I'm going to achieve that was really, really good for me. Achieving it, then like people look back at it like, what'd you learn from it? And it like the immediate response, I was like, well, I learned I finally, had what it take to do it. But then I like having a little bit of deeper understanding as I really, in introspect, kind of look back at it, was like, man, I learned a lot about my own grip and my own structure and my own pressures on the gun to get the gun to behave in such a way that it then just became about like visual confirmation of what I was seeing as the pistol, lifted and returned kind of to the exact precise spot on this little 4-inch by 2-inch upper A zone. It was like, really thinking about it, it wasn't just a waste of 1,500 rounds of ammo and 4 days of time chasing this result. It was, what did I learn along the journey afterwards? Like if I really go back and look at it, and it was like, oh, like the way I teach grip now is not the way I taught grip, even a week prior to that pursuit, it was good. It was something I needed to really spark a lot of that that interest level where I don't just get stagnant as a trainer either. Like, well, I've been doing it this way for the last 2 years, so this is the way I'm going to teach it. It was like, oh my God, I've learned something new along the way in my own journey as well, in pursuit of maybe at first, like, I just want this goal.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what did it take to actually achieve that goal? And then deeper, what did I understand that happened in achieving that goal? So, I mean, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And to date, that is that hands down is the hardest thing I've ever achieved. Is it becoming easier? Absolutely. I was just working with a student yesterday, and I had one shot out and did it in like 2:02. And, that student was like, I can't even process stuff that fast. And you cold on your very first run. And I was like, yeah, and then like shooting just the entire head box. I did like my very follow-up. I had 2 slightly out of the A zone. So like 4 in and 2 out, but all of them were in about a 3.5-inch group in the center of the actual 6x6 head box in like 1.9 seconds. And he was just like, my mind is blown. He's like, how did you even accomplish that? I'm like, well, it took a week of dedicated, I'm going to pursue this. And at almost any cost, I'm going to make some sacrifices of kind of taking away other aspects of my shooting to just focus on this one thing. But man, was it a learning experience. And I think more people probably need to do that at some point in time throughout their journey, to kind of figure some things out about not only just themselves and their mental fortitude, but to again, to be able to kind of learn in introspection, like what it is they're doing or what it is they're pursuing and understanding. So yeah. I've yet to find something for 2024 that interests me, but the year's young, right? That interests me to want to pursue that again, but I'm sure I will find something, because I love the challenges too. That's what keeps it fresh and new to me, to want to keep learning and keep pushing and keep getting better.
Yeah. Next is going to be a 2x2 box. So there's 2 things that I hear with that, and there is, and also, and you may not be saying it overtly, but I think it's kind of important to say for the people listening, because I think people who are listening to you and they're likely an instructor, likely a professional end user. So 2 things that are really coming out of that is like, if you're like, don't chase content and virality with the social media. Document the journey, because that's a lot of what you did. You
Absolutely.
you were documenting every time. Like,
I posted every day.
Yeah.
Frustration. I posted.
Right.
I wanted to share. Like, this is hard, folks.
Yeah. And the second thing was that you just understand the process. Like you just, it's not really so much the result, but like you got so much out of getting that result that it was just, it was like the journey was more worth it than everything, because now you understand so much about the grip. And that's
100%.
It's just like one of those, it's very cliche, but it's true what Masashi says. Like, once you see the way, you see it in all things. And this is the same process in jiu-jitsu. This is the same process in lifting and in shooting. And I think this is something that it makes it hard for people to accept or really realize, because it's like your performance level is just so much higher than the average person, that when you tell them about like, hey, well, you need to do this, and they're like, oh, I've got this, that, and the other thing, and the neck thing and the shoulder thing. Like, dude, yeah, I've had those things too. Yep. All the same things that you're going through.
You.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, golly,
Like we all have the same things going on in life.
Sure.
But it's just like the real separation between that degree of mastery and, the kind of the novice level is really the level of commitment. That's really master, novice, right? All that space in between is commitment.
Yep. 100%.
So
100%.
Let's talk about kind of a process, or really just a fundamental standard, right? Just, it's like, okay, you want to teach this stuff. You want to be considered knowledgeable in this, or you really want to be a master of a craft. What's your process for that? And what do you think it is as it pertains to shooting?
like for me, I believe that a coach or an instructor needs to have an absolute deep understanding of not even just a skill, but right of everything, technique, skill. Again, just the thought process that goes in with it as well. It's really easy to go take a 2-day or 3-day quote unquote like instructor class and think like, okay, well, I've got I've got the little tidbits of information I need. So all I need to do is just repeat that stuff to other people and people will pay me to do that. That seems really, really easy, in kind of in foresight, and I think that's why a lot of people get kind of drawn into, I'm going to be an instructor because it sure seems like an easier way and maybe a little bit more enjoyable way of making money or making an income than it is, like my day-to-day job. But I think people are also then, those types of folks that are, that want to be, again, those experts or those instructors are doing themselves, and not only their clientele, but also, but mainly doing themselves a huge disservice in lacking that in-depth understanding of what each of those topics actually is, right? And not really caring too much about the journey. The end result is I just want to get this certificate. I want to get this piece of paper that tells me that I'm worthy of sharing information to somebody else. And then, like I said, I feel like you're doing your student a disservice. You're also doing yourself, most of all, the biggest disservice by lacking that fundamental understanding or that in-depth knowledge of the journey. You're trying to shortcut everything for the sake of what you might believe to be easy money. Is coaching hard? You're damn right. Like I've been a master automotive technician, which means in order to be a master automotive technician, I had 26 years turning wrenches and studying and going to classes and learning new technology every single day. I didn't come into the game right out of college and be like, well, I'm a master and I deserve top pay and top benefits. And I'm going to be the God amongst men's at the shop that I'm working at the dealership I'm working at. Dude, it was an everyday struggle. It's misdiagnosing things. It's misunderstanding things. It's thinking you get things figured out and you really don't. And having that deep desire to truly learn and understand that allowed me to become master. And master was just a piece of paper. Like the mastery understanding was the 60 plus hours of continuous education, on nights and weekends and going to classes across the country to learn how to become better just at working on cars. Right. And, let alone that to completely change career fields and become what I believe, like a master educator. Dude, that was completely different. It took me a good 5 to 6 years of just, of shooting and learning and understanding and wanting that in-depth knowledge of things before I ever felt even remotely comfortable sharing my experience and knowledge with somebody else. And then let alone having them pay me to do that, and I take that very, very seriously.
Yeah.
Like that's a strong conviction when somebody is willing to give you their hard-earned money to want to kind of draw from your education and experience level, and that can't be taken lightly. And so for me, it's like continuing the education, continuing the journey, getting a better, deeper understanding. And to me, that's what truly makes a master. A master doesn't need to walk around and call themselves a master. A master is just the guy that's like, man, I tell people all the time, I'm just as interested in shooting now as I was 14 years ago, I'm very interested in like the deeper understanding of those things. And along the way, if there's things that I can glean information from that becomes shareable knowledge to somebody else, by God, I want to help you be able to overcome those things. And that's the rewarding part of it for me. It like getting to earn a living doing it is a true blessing, but I would almost do this for free, granted it's my career. But if I were doing something else and teaching on the weekends just to teach, dude, there's been plenty of times. And I love to do it even on social media. That's why I love to give advice. I love to share knowledge. I love to give away the free milk, so to speak, a lot, because I'm interested always in just progression and betterment and seeing other folks' success. I mean, that's what drives me more than anything.
Yeah, I think also it's like you're saving people time. And
Yeah.
I think that's really what the money is about. It's just like people don't get those days back, and you really put a lot into coaching as well.
Mhm.
And like one of the things that people will say is like, well, if you train with like a high level performance guy, it's going to mess you up for kind of like this tactical application side. And I will say, as someone who has been in or around the military since 2003, that's not true. Um, so that's the first thing, right? That's just not true. It's like this. There's this antiquated idea that, well, if I train to hit like kind of like this, we'll use kind of the old school target, right, where it's like it shows you to aim like just above the belly button. Like, well, if you teach people to that's what to do, I would say, like, look, if you tell people to aim at a specific spot, that's what they'll do. All you have to do is just like, hey, just make your point of impact here instead of here.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing where like we take a jujitsu guy and put him in a weapons-based environment. All we did was change his priority. We didn't change his skill set. We didn't adjust his entire way of fighting. All we say
Right.
was like, okay, as opposed to just kind of going for a submission that kind of presents itself, what we want you to do is now focus on the hands and make sure that you control them, making sure you bundle the arms. And as a priority, try to escape from behind the person or get to the side so that way they can't use a weapon. And it's the same thing with shooting. Like I remember we did a private lesson. We spent about half a day together.
Mhm.
And my big issue was, hey, the red dot, like I'm trying to shoot matches, but I'm dropping the red dot in from the top. And it's just kind of like giving me all these issues because I'm now dipping the muzzle lower than I need. It just gave me all the sign. And you're just like, why are you doing that? Stop doing that. And it's just like, and like, had we learned kind of like, and you shoot and you taught me a process as far as presentation goes. And
Mhm.
it's like, had I developed that process, I would have been able to take that into a tactical circumstance as well as a competitive circumstance. And all I would have to do is change how I prioritize within the situation.
Right.
So what do you say as far as kind of the difference between a process driven approach versus a technique or a kind of like very specific solution for a very specific scenario?
Sure. Well, and that's a big thing too, like with teaching, and especially a lot of old school teaching, right? Like
Mhm.
what works for me is going to work for thee. So I'm only going to teach you the things that only work for me. So they're what we're doing is we're kind of reducing the capacity of the student to learn what deep understanding actually means, right? So, and that we see that a lot. Where technique based classes become like, okay, this is the one technique, right? And a lot of times we'll hear that, well, this is my way, or this is the way, or sometimes instructors will refrain from using this is my way, and we'll they'll say the things like, well, this is a way, like, excuse my language, but fuck the way. Like let's learn and understand to be like, let's get a broader and more deeper understanding of like what it is we're trying to accomplish, and then what it is that allows you versus what it allows me to accomplish that particular task. Right? That's the understanding portion of it. If somebody says, you know what, I can't grip the gun with like a thumbs forward, two-hand grip. I grip the gun with a teacup grip. Well, you know what?
Mhm.
That's a way. And maybe that's a way that works for you. Let's work on improving that particular way to see better, and to see a better improvement or a deeper understanding of things. Like it doesn't need to be technique specific, process specific. That's the difference, right? And I'm
Mhm.
not saying refraining from teaching technique, because obviously, we're not dumb. Like there are
Right.
particular techniques that work better at achieving a deeper understanding or a broader understanding of a particular process than other things are. And that's
Mhm.
where then sharing your experiences as a coach or as an instructor, are going to help along the way. But strict adherence to something doesn't take into account how each individual person learns or processes information, or maybe has mobility issues, or has Maybe their body or their brain processes information a little bit differently, or there's certain things that each person does better than other things. So no two people are built the same. So trying to be technique based only is not the way either. So there's a lot of things like I in my 2-day class, I talk a lot about grip and structure. I've also had people, kind of tell me like, man, your class was great. It was pretty broad, but I swear to God, Tim, like your entire 2-day class ought to be just called Tim Herron's grip and structure driven class. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not teaching just like, this is the grip you need. Like I'm teaching it from an aspect of like, these are the things that I've learned along the way that tend to matter to me to get the gun to behave or get the firearm to behave a certain way predictably so that I can begin to understand and evaluate what it's doing to learn how to do things more consistent or faster or whatever that term might mean to you. And so let me kind of like, let me take you on a journey, for 45 minutes about what I've learned along 14 years of, kind of practicing firearm shooting, and showing you what I've learned along the way. And so I found that this is important and this is important and this isn't as important as this is. But if you can apply these things and, some people are like, yeah, that doesn't seem to work for me. That's great. That's fine too. Let's find something that does work for you. And then, a lot of the exercises or drills or skills that we work on become more of a way of allowing that shooter to then explore what truly works for them and explore the journey, like to enjoy the journey of like, hey, if I do this, this happens, or if I do this, this happens. Great. And now you get to spend the next hour and a half to 2 hours of morning of day one exploring your own technique to find what works best for you. It's not about making 12 other Tim Herrons. It's about finding 12 individual processes for those 12 individual students to become better and not only just better in technique for themselves, but also like better evaluators, right? To be able to learn how to evaluate your own processes to find out what process works best for you, or to at least even start you on that journey. And so that's, to me, I think that's what makes a better coach or better educator, is to give the students the freedom. Like you're going to give them some guide, some like, here's a better pathway, maybe, here's a roadmap, and here are 7 different, pathways to get you to this kind of this final result that you might be looking for. Now it's up to you to pick one or pick multiple paths and study them intensely and deeply. And that's what I like to, to bring to classes, is having people just be able to like have their mind blown by their own processes, and by their own experimentation and experience, versus like, well, Tim Herron told me to grip it this way, so I'm going to grip it this way. And then they go to somebody else's class and they learn a technique, something different. And they're like, well, you know what, this actually is better. And Tim didn't know what he was talking about. Like, no, I don't care what technique you use. Like, it's less about the technique and it's all about the exploration, right? Like, just open your mind to exploration, and dude, the sky's the limit.
So I got a interesting question, right? And it just kind of occurred to me as you were talking about this, right? Because one of the things we see also within the self-defense space is that people will spend thousands of dollars and hours getting the next certification, as opposed to go and use that same amount of weekend time, ammunition towards kind of developing themselves and really understanding who they are. Because this idea where you're talking about like, well, you learn this way, that way, this guy and that way. I think if you're truly understanding of your own capabilities, that you can train with different coaches and they're not going to change what you're doing that much. I think if you're changing what you're doing all the time,
yep,
I think that's a kind of a sign like that's not a good sign. I think that inconsistency is not a good sign. Like maybe I'll learn something, I'll learn something from a different shooter, or maybe I'll train with a different black belt, and maybe I'll learn something, maybe an insight, maybe something right, as far as like kind of a reaction, maybe a strategy. But as far as like my overall technique, I think like, okay, maybe he'll show me something new, but I think if like he totally changes everything, I think there's kind of like a lack of a foundation there. Like your
100%.
foundation isn't strong.
Yep.
And so what do you say to the person who says, well, because I've heard this a lot from numerous people that the return on investment to going into shooting matches is not the same as going to an instructor course or a certification course or something like that, some type of training event. And they don't really see how there is this value to getting a classification in USPSA or or IDPA, whatever, right? Or
Mhm.
just kind of let's just say owning the skill, owning the foundation, right? They think it's better to kind of go to these courses. Where do you say to that
And
person?
it's again, I think a lot of it is like, to me, the kind of the dividing line of that is it's easier sometimes for people to just pay to go to classes to validate things and seek validation versus seeking understanding. And I think some people have it backwards. Like they go like,
Yeah.
well, I go take a training class to seek an understanding. No, most people go to a training class to seek validation from the instructor that they're already doing things pretty well. Like we
Yeah.
all, as trainers, I mean, if there were 100 people that are all coaches and trainers listening, listening in on this, if I put everybody in a room and I said, all right, who here raise your hand if you feel like people have paid you for nothing other than to come to your class to show you what they think they know. Every single person be able to raise their hand and be like, yep, we've experienced those
Oh,
people all the time. That person is not there seeking an understanding of anything. That person there is seeking validation, right? Um,
yeah.
but we also but the problem is we parlay that the other direction. So many people think like, well, when I go to a match, I'm just seeking validation with just a score instead of learning and understanding that, like, actually, no,
Mhm.
I'm not looking to seek a validation from the score. I'm seeking a deeper understanding of like, oh shit, my score wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. What caused these failures or what caused these successes? And that, I think, more self-exploration happens and deeper understanding happens on putting yourself out there in kind of a competitive or semi-competitive environment. I think more understanding happens there.
Yeah.
Going to the range, just going to the range on a weekend, not even shooting a match, but just actually going to the range and seeking a deeper understanding of why you do the things that you do. And, or can I go a little faster? Can I push a little harder on this? What's out there, and just having that, like I said, that mentality of like, I'm gonna learn and understand a little bit more about this. Let me evaluate a little bit more about what's going on versus just listening to somebody tell me, hey, don't do this or hey, do that. And then just taking kind of blindly taking their word for it. Right. So I tell people all the time, like even in classes, like, hey, man, I want you to challenge yourself and challenge everything that I have taught you over the 2 days. Like, don't just take my word for it. Like, I appreciate the time that you have taken, and I appreciate the investment you've made in taking a class with me. Now I want you to take this education that you've received or this information that you've received me over these next 2 days, and I want you to challenge it deeply in your own practice. I want you to go to matches and challenge it. I want you to go to the range and challenge it. Is truly Tim talking about the right things or giving me a deeper understanding of things? Or was he completely full of shit? Like, I challenge everything that I learn, even things that I've learned on my own without somebody else teaching me something. I challenge it all the time. Again, I kind of bring up Rob Latham a few times. There have been times that Rob has made me the most frustrated man in the world because I'll be like, man, I've got this figured out, right? And there have been times that I've talked to Rob about it, and Robbie, in his 40 plus years of experience, as the highest level competitor ever, Robbie has asked me, a 3 words that would just be so frustrating. His response will just be, "Are you sure?"
Oh
What,
man.
what do you mean? Like, am I sure? What? Well, I thought I was, and just, but that always constantly asking yourself all the time, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure this is the new way? Are you sure this is the technique for you? And that's the challenge. That's the skill. That's the deeper understanding, is going to the range all the time. And even when I'm like, man, I figured some shit out today. This is awesome. This is one of the best training sessions I've ever had. And then going to the range 2-3 days later or the next week and thinking, man, I had it all figured out. I can't wait to implement that again. But then in the back of my mind, right, that little Robbie voice, are you sure? And then you go back and you evaluate it again. You're like, well, maybe I'm not so sure. Maybe there was something to the previous thing that I was doing, but maybe there's something to implementing a little bit of this new in with this old and making it like, maybe that's the new way. And so you're like, I'm never sure about everything. And it's such a great place to be, because you're always seeking that next, okay, I think I'm sure, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to keep sorting this out. I'm going to keep figuring this out. And that's,
you're staying agnostic.
100%, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, a good friend of ours, Scott Jedlinski, just mentioned it, I think a week or two ago, where he said something about, you know, somebody asked him like, hey man, what's been one of the best eye-opening experiences you've had as a trainer? And I think Scott's answer to that was, don't believe your own hype, you know? And it's so easy to, you know, to be a high functioning trainer or instructor, or a very popular trainer. You know, I mean, Scott sells out 109 plus classes a year, whatever. It becomes really easy to fall into the trap of believing your own hype, you know, and believing your own hype. That's, to me, that's the number one detriment to when you stop learning, you stop understanding, you stop that deep pursuit of understanding and knowledge, you know, because you're like, I'm the man. Everybody tells me I'm the man. Everybody pays me to tell me I'm the man. Like I'm doing it all correctly, right? And that's such a detriment to your own progression.
Yeah.
And you know, like I know I'm a pretty good competitor. Would I like to be better? Absolutely. I don't believe my own hype. You know, I can have a great match and follow it up with a bad match. You know, having one great match does not make me the best shooter in the country. Like if I won a national championship this year, it doesn't say like, well, I'm the best ever. I believe my own hype. Nope. It's like, okay, how do I win another one? You know, or how do I not lose the next one? You know, and that's that, again, that continuous pursuit of, like we'd like to say, pursuit of perfection. There's nothing perfect about it. It's that continuous pursuit of excellence, and excellence not meaning perfect, but like excelling and continuously excelling. And that's the, I don't believe any hype. I'm just a guy that wants to get better all the time. I'm always looking to get better.
You know, there's always questions too. I think now that I have you here, I think it's important we kind of like get a competitor's perspective on base skill level or levels of degrees of focus. So for instance, like in martial arts, kind of each belt will have its kind of area of focus. And then it's like, you really know once you're kind of in the middle or you're in semi-pro, once you take those skills and you start to have some sort of a self-expression. You get to like for us in jiu-jitsu, purple belt is kind of like, that's the hardest belt to get, because now you really own the techniques. You can chain the attacks. You have some sense of aggression, and you can actually express what you want to happen as you start to practice it. Mm-hmm. So is there something similar to that in shooting, as far as like someone like they're a new instructor, what they should focus on, or they're a new competitor, what should they focus on?
Absolutely. I mean, we see the same thing, right? I mean, in shooting, it's the exact same way. Like, let's focus on some, like, just exploration of techniques that keep you in a safe environment, keep you from being a detriment to yourself and other people, right? Like muzzle awareness, finger placement in and outside the trigger guard, when to begin engaging targets, when not to, how to grip the gun, you know, like all of those little, what we like to say fundamentals, right? So we're playing around things with like stance. We're playing around things with like balance and grip pressures and returnability of the pistol and things like that. And I think those are things that we need to explore as as just new shooters,
Yeah.
but then along the way, like as you kind of expound on those things, it's the exact same way, as you kind of expound on those things, like we used to think, and as new shooters, I'm just as guilty of it as anybody. Like somebody told me, like that whole nose over toes, like balance your weight on the balls of your feet, slightly bend at the knees. You want your feet about a shoulder width or slightly shoulder width apart. You want to grip the gun in kind of an isosceles, square your shoulders and your hips to the target. And that's how you engage everything. And you see people that are, very new. I'd stand up and kind of show you, but how they do. They'll spend like 30 seconds just kind of getting themselves ready on the line. Okay, I got to be right about here. Okay. And then you draw the gun, and then they do, like, we teach them like the 4-step draw process. So everything becomes very robotic. They're like, and then they drive the gun out there, and it's not a bad thing. It's part of the learning process. They're the white belt learning how to understand and grasp a fundamental concept. And you have to have a grasp of those things first, before then they become more fluid. And then they, like you said, like as you become a purple belt, like now you've kind of found your way, like your style, how to blend things together. And this is where guys then start to, but this is the same thing, like kind of on the Dunning-Kruger curve too, right? Guys are like, I know nothing, and I'm going to try to figure this out. And then it's like, once they start to develop some smoothness in things, and they're like, well, this works really good for me, I can't wait to jump on the internet and tell everybody how much of an expert I am, because I have figured out these 2 or 3 things and I'm seeing drastic improvement. Everybody needs to experience it the exact same way I do. And if you didn't, you're wrong. Right. And that's at a detriment. But yeah, I mean, along the way, we see the same thing. Like I said, I used to believe that stance was incredibly important, but then getting deeper into the knowledge and understanding of like performance shooting and practical shooting, like in USPSA and IDPA, we are constantly like shooting around walls and barricades and shooting from squatted or kneeled positions, or like, I can tell you right now,
separating the lower body from the upper body.
Exactly. Like it does not matter.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, well, you've got to balance your weight forward bias, and you don't want the gun pushing you around. That's true to an extent, but then you're going to be put in different situations or different positions, even like within the realm of competitive shooting, where I'm shooting multiple shots on one foot falling out of a position, or, it's all kinds of things like that, where you just like, was stance really that important in the grand scheme of things? No. But then we immediately throw out, like we kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're like, well, if it's not important to me, it shouldn't be important to anybody. And so then anybody talking about stance, dismiss what they have to say. They're wrong too. And it's like, hang on now. You've got to understand, you got to be able to meet somebody head on where they are in their journey. So you kind of know how to tailor the information that is best received for them at where they're at. And I think that's the difference between a good instructor or a good coach and a.
Are you saying that there's a progression, that there's levels, and you can actually meet them there? So that's crazy, man.
Yeah.
So yeah. So let's think about this too, because I don't think like the competition shooting has totally changed my shooting. I think it's really refined it in a lot of ways. And I think it's just really made me focus on my process, and also like it's given me that ability to be able to test myself and see kind of these different things. Like as you talk about the movement, like in my mind, I think I am running to a position. But then when I watch myself on video, it's like I got cement shoes and I'm just like the stiffest motherfucker you've ever seen in your life. And then, so I'm like, oh, okay. So it gives me things as far as like areas I need to isolate within my dry fire and within my training. So like there are times in my dry fire where I will focus purely on just moving my eyes from target to target. There are times where I'll just isolate on just moving from one cone to another. I'll look at this spot, run to it, like really like put some ass and really run to that spot. And then those things actually start to translate into the matches. So the dry fire became, because of that process, or because of that cyclic feedback from the dry fire and the matches, dry fire became exciting for me, because I'm not gonna lie, Tim, dry fire used to bore me to fucking like, wow, this fucking good looks tasty. Like, it used to bore me that fucking out of my mind.
Sure.
But like as I looked at it that way,
we're very singularly dimensional, right? It's like, well, my dry fire, I'm going to rack the gun, and I'm going to learn how to press the trigger without disturbing the sights, or I'm going to just work on my draw, or I'm just going to work on my reloads. And that's the extent of dry fire, you know? And the great thing about matches is the matches then are the test, right? Like we talked about that hell an hour ago. The thing about the test is that it's what's giving you the feedback to then start to evaluate, okay, what am I good at? And what am I absolutely like, what do I really need to work on? And those things become like the catalyst or the roadmap then to help direct my attention in dry fire, to then keep dry fire interesting. It's like, oh man, I suck at movement. Well, how can I implement movement in my dry fire to not be so bad at movement? Oh, well, I know that, man, when I move left to right, I move like at a snail's pace. But when I move right to left, I seem to move okay. Well, you know what? I can spend 3 times 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day just working on, I don't know, 5 feet to 6 feet of movement, having the gun up ready to shoot when I get that position, and kind of refine that skill to build that weakness into a strength. And then I get to go to next month's match or next week's match or whatever the case may be and validate it. Then it becomes like, oh, I get to test it again. And hey, I passed the test this time. Oh, I failed this other test. I need to, now I've found I need to work on this little thing. And that's what keeps that, like you said, it's cyclic. You get to things that I learned up here then become this week's goals in work. And then, I go to the live fire range in practice to implement and validate the stuff that I've worked on in dry fire. And then, okay, now I get to go to the next week's match and I'm going to test those things again. And it just, that's what keeps the circle rolling,
Yeah.
I do the same thing. Like my dry fire is always driven off of what were my weakest points, or what were the things that I saw that need to be worked on from the match that I just shot, or even last week's practice session. I wasn't so good at that. I really need to iron out that visual awareness of this, or I really, I for some reason my hands were so cold yesterday in practice. I kept getting a bad draw on the gun, and getting a subpar grip. Man, that's what I'm going to work on in dry fire the next time I pick up the gun and just in dry fire. Like it builds that hunger to like, I'm going to fix that so that it's no longer a detriment the next time.
So let's get kind of the basic process, right? Let's say, hey, Tim, like I'm not classified. I'm really I at least want to be competent in this. What's kind of the short-term goal you would typically give somebody, or what is kind of like, if say, hey, like I need some gear to practice, like what are the guidance you give them so they can practice at home and they can have fun and be safe shooting their first match?
So the main thing is just a good understanding of like just what safety is, right? Mm-hmm. So, can you safely draw the gun from the holster without flagging yourself or flagging or being unsafe just in your general gun handling, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a ton. Like if you're not aimed at a target, finger needs to be off the trigger. You need to always be 100% aware of where your muzzle direction is pointed at all times. And can you keep the gun, like if you're facing directly downrange, can you keep the gun pointed downrange while you're moving left to right? So like if I moved to my left, can I still keep the gun pointed downrange as I traverse, from say right to left? Or if I'm moving from left to right, can I still keep the muzzle awareness downrange? If you can do those things, dude, come to a match. You're ready.
Yeah.
Right? You don't need to have some like, oh man, I really need to be better in my overall shooting. The other thing you need to do is like, do you know how to just fundamentally line the sights up or line your dot up to a target and just press the trigger and be able to kind of hit generally where you're aimed at? If so, you're ready to come to your first match. Like
Yeah.
you're already ready to take the first test, so to speak, you know? And don't, the whole thing for a lot of folks is I'm not going to come to a match until I'm good enough. Well, define what good enough is, and this goes back to that fundamental understanding of what do you believe is good enough? And some people are like, well, I need to be at a B class level before I even come to a match. What's that mean? Or I need to be a B class level before I feel like I'm a good defensive practitioner. What's that mean to you? What is B class level of skills? There is no one like list of, can you do this, and this? Okay, great. You're B class. It's a constant evolution, right? And learning how to evolve your skill set to meet certain criteria, while at the same time maybe just learning and understanding or evaluating other criteria that maybe you don't necessarily possess yet. And that's the main thing. It's like people that want to score 100% on a test that they've never taken before, they've never prepared for, but they buy a textbook and they're just going to study, or so they think to study, without the guidance of a professor or a teacher to help them get an understanding of the book that they just got. And then they're just going to take a test blindly, like, well, I really got to study up on this before I get good. No, like you remember high school, remember teachers on the first day of a new quarter or a new semester of something, the teacher would give you a pop quiz, right? Or a pre-test, and you would take a pre-test and people were like, oh God, the pre-test, like, we don't even understand the material, but the pretest was there to give you an understanding of where you needed to focus your efforts, as well as for the teacher to be able to focus his or her efforts onto how to get you to understand the information that you're lacking from the pretest that you took.
Yeah.
Think about the match itself. Like your very first match that's the pretest. You're just there to take that pretest to kind of learn and evaluate your own skill set. What do I possess, and what am I missing, so that I can then have like built that initial roadmap to self betterment in my own practice, whether it be dry fire and live fire.
Yeah, and that right there, that's the honest learning. That's the honest understanding. Like the classifiers. I think classifiers are a lot more honest than a lot of these like drills that are already public consumption. Because I think kind of the byproduct of public school education is people will see a drill and they'll just practice the test instead of just, basically going through the process of pistol training and then just shooting the drill as a honest experience to really give them real feedback. But practicing the test over and over again with the exact questions, the exact same multiple choice, and then doing well, that's not really representative of your real skill.
100%.
And so, I have to say the quiet part out loud. I'm sorry, guys, but it is true. So, and that's what I like about the competition model. Is like the classifiers. You don't really know what's going on. You just have to have a strong understanding of fundamentals. So if you're performing at 40%, it'll show. If it's at 50, it'll show. If it's at 90, it'll show. So those are the areas that matter. So let's talk about the opposite end of the spectrum. Tim, really want my G card. How do I get it?
First of all, again, sacrifices are going to have to be made. And there's guys that have gotten their G card in 6 months after they picked up a gun and started shooting. And there's other guys that it's taken them years. It took me about 4 years to get my G card. There was a lot of aimless practice, so to speak, where I didn't have my mind in the right spots. I didn't have my priorities right. I'd go to the range and shoot 500 rounds a week, but I wasn't doing things in the right order to really focus on, like prioritizing the correct things in the right thing, in the right times. It's commitment for one, and commitment to the craft. It's the same thing. With like, I want to become a black belt. Okay. Well, first of all, you don't walk into a BJJ gym and say like, and tell the coach, like, I'm going to be a black belt in 6 months. You're going to get laughed out of the gym, right? Like it's years of development. It's years of understanding. It's, and that's the big thing. It's knowing that it's going to be a journey, and you need to learn to understand and embrace the journey. There's no shortcuts to it. You could try to shortcut it. You can shoot classifiers over and over and over again, or shoot the test over and over and over again and tell yourself, yep, I earned my G card that way. But then you're going to go to your first match as a newly minted GM, and you're going to fail, and you're going to fail drastic. And I've seen guys do that all the time. I made G in 6 months, and then 5 months afterwards, you never see that guy at a match. It's like, what happened to that guy? Oh, he learned real quick that,
It's like kids who want to be an adult. It's like don't rush to be an adult, guys. Like you will spend the longest amount of time. Like if you can stay a blue belt 4 years, do it, because it's just more time to refine your technique. Like if you rush to be an adult, you're gonna have adult consequences, and that's what like being a G or a black belt is. But
and the thing is there's no real timeline to it, right? Like I said, it took me about 4 years. Mm-hmm. The main thing about the timeline was I used to be the guy that would put in the hour and a half, marathon dry fire sessions 5-6 days a week, and go to the range twice a week and shoot 500 to 1,000 rounds per week, and
wow.
I stayed at kind of a perpetual B class level for about 3 years. The big takeaway for me is I took my first initial like big, kind of official 2-day class with Mike Seeklander out in Oklahoma. And the very first thing that Mike told me day one of that first class was, he's like, dude, you're not practicing right. And I was like, oh, how dare you? I am so in depth into my practice, and you don't. And Mike's like, you're not practicing with the correct priorities, and it's not purposeful practice. You're seeking a result beyond the understanding. Seek an understanding first, right? Be purposeful and be focused. Instead of trying to practice all the things, go with a plan when you go to practice, and stick to the plan. It's like going to the gym. Like, I'm a New Year's resolutionist, right? And I'm not talking to me, but we see it all the time. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to pack on 10 pounds of muscle, so I'm going to go to the gym on January 1st. And then so what do? You go in and you're overwhelmed. You look around, you're like, oh my God, all this equipment. Well, I guess I'm going to do a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a whole lot of this and a whole lot of this. And you do everything, and you leave the gym an hour and a half later, and you're like, I really don't know what I worked on, but I worked out and I feel good about it. And you do that for 3 months or 4 months straight, but then you're not seeing the results, or it's very easy to look past any results that you might have made for, well, I'm not feeling that burn anymore when I go to the gym. My muscles don't ache because your body started to get adjusted to exercise. Mm-hmm. And so, but you believe it's like, well, the exercise isn't working. I'm not seeing these immediate results. I've only lost 10 pounds and I wanted to lose 30. And I only gained, maybe 1 pound of muscle mass. I wanted to gain 10. This isn't working. It's a waste of my time, so you don't appreciate the journey for what it is, right? I think a lot of people are too infatuated with instantaneous results, right? We become a now culture instead of an understanding culture. And that's the big thing. Like as a GM, there's got to be a dedication to the craft, not to a technique, not to a particular skill, not to an end result, to the craft. And if you've just got that hunger to help drive you, you can make GM. And like I said, it could be as easy as 6 months, but even if it took you 3 years to make GM, like, just paying attention and having that hunger to the craft itself, you're well on your way.
Yeah, it's when people are chasing results like that, like, of course, like I've had numerous people ask me about getting a black belt, and I like, look, it took me 13 years, man. Like it didn't take me overnight, and I wasn't even expecting it. Like the week I got promoted, I had just bought a new brown belt the week before, because I was like, I'm going to be here a little while longer. So like, if you're the type of person who's looking for like a specific result, I would say nobody really fails getting that. It's like people just quit. Yeah. And if you just don't quit, and if you focus, you listen to people who have the results you want, a lot of times you'll get the results that they have. Being a national level competitor, that's something else. That's a whole, I mean, you talked about sacrifice. Like that's a whole other level of sacrifice.
Absolutely.
That's like
I put other
having
things
this.
on
Yeah.
hold, to make those
Yeah.
thing happen too. I mean, I went a number of years, like
Mhm.
unfortunately not being able to, to kind of hold down a relationship with, with somebody,
Mhm.
with a couple of, a couple of girlfriends along the way kind of thing, because, the level of sacrifice and commitment that I had to certain things that I wanted to be good at, kind of stood in the way of, like I said, developing friendships or developing relationships. But
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be at that, but you just got to know how to prioritize and how to balance
Yeah.
those priorities and things. Um, I think certain people are like, well, I want to be a high level competitor at no cost, at whatever, at no cost. Well, it's got to cost. It's got to
Right.
come from someplace.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be like, well, I'm going to throw away my entire livelihood, or I'm going to throw away my entire family and relationships to
Mhm.
go pursue that. That's probably not the right attitude to have either. There are people that have made those sacrifices before, but it doesn't have to come from that. But I mean, look at
Yeah.
things that you can cut out, like, man, I have to have an hour just sitting in front of the TV to kind of decompress. Or you can use, like as you can pursue that decompression in other ways that are, maybe a little more fruitful. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna strap on the gun and dry fire for 10 minutes, or I'm gonna go to the range for even just 30 minutes and maybe put 200 rounds of, in like once a month downrange, or whatever the case may be, and it doesn't have to come at the cost of everything, but you got to have a little introspect, a little evaluation time to yourself to be like, okay, what's important to me? If this is truly important, how am I going to carve out the time to make it important?
So Tim, I think we need to do another show too on like how to practice and just
Yes.
discuss that, especially since you have a
I
course all around that. I mean, with
Yep.
you and AJ Zito as well, another super good shooter, really
Yes.
good guy as well. But how do people connect with you? How do they find you?
So I'm pretty available just about everywhere. So on Facebook, you can look me up at Tim Herron, or like my professional page, which is Tim Herron Shooting. I'm on Instagram, Tim Herron Shooting. I've also got, I don't know, something like 100 videos or something now posted on my YouTube channel, which is Gasp. It's Tim Herron Shooting. So I'm on just about everything except like Twitter. I kind of stay away from that cesspool. But yeah, social media, reach out to me, send me a DM. I've also got a website, which is timherronshooting.com. And it's got my schedule of classes I'm going to be. It also lists all what different classes and offerings I have, has a little bio about me. You can send me an email at tim@timherronshooting.com or info@timherronshooting.com. Like I said, send me an email, send me a private message, or just reach out to me, via any of the social media outlets. I try to be the most available trainer and instructor and coach and friend I possibly can, because I love to help people. So
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, guys, Tim Herron is a guy I personally recommend. I train with him, and he is an excellent coach as well as an excellent shooter. So if you guys have comments, please leave them. Or you guys have questions, please leave them in the comment section. I'll make sure we get to Tim. Tim, thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
dude, John, thank you so much. I appreciate this.